Okay, folks, we are no longer live streaming. I am also going to stop our recording, although I don't want to because I know we're going to get into some really good conversations.
I had to go hard on
Let it roll. Just let it roll,
those
Rob.
participants who are still here with us, as well as those who are our panelists who are still with us. Let's talk a little bit. We'll see how we can get more people into the conversation. For the panelists, if you folks need to get out of here, go ahead and get out of here. We know you have a dozen or more things that you need to be doing. But for the attendees, we still got 61 people here. We got a hand up. Let me see if we can find whose hand is up.
This is Amber Hanson. I believe Amber's hand has been raised the whole time.
Oh, okay.
So Amber might have something to say, maybe not.
Amber? No, it's okay.
Put her hand down.
She put her hand down. All righty. Any other wrap-up comments, folks? I know great job. I mean, we covered a lot of ground in a short period of time.
I wanted to just put one thing out, connecting. Lisa pointed out that on Facebook, folks were talking about Leaders Igniting Transformation and African American Roundtable have started to put out demands. So kind of aligning with and siphoning from community some of the will in the current moment about the changes they'd like to see. I think those are important to review. The question was how to support them. And I think that might be a little trickier other than directly joining alongside LIT and African American Roundtable. Another campaign that's out there that I don't think gets enough attention or has plenty but could deserve a lot more is Liberate MKE, which is connected to Marquesa Tucker's work along with a bunch of other folks. But that's looking really critically. You know, Marquesa did, I think, what citizens ought to be doing. She went to a meeting, felt mystified by it, a public budget meeting, demystified the process for herself alongside other community members, started getting really versed in that whole process, what goes into it, and started actively advocating within it. And regardless of what outcomes you want, I think that's what citizenship looks like. And I think if our civics books weren't 40 years old in our MPS high schools right now, that's what our young people could be getting excited about. And frankly, if there are, more conversations in the topics of history, political science, sociology, et cetera, in schools that didn't feel really removed from the lived experience of young people, I think they would be excited about the kind of shit we're talking about right now.
Well, it's civics, right? I mean, it's civics.
Civics. Yeah. Civics is sexy. Is it sexy? Not sexy.
It's also historically grounded, because that's the only way that police accountability organizations in Milwaukee learned about how the process works, is they attended the Fire and Police Commission meetings.
Yeah.
And actually learned what the freeholder clause was that prevented property owners in this city from filing complaints against the police. And then they addressed it. The other quick thing I want to say about the African American Community Roundtable, Liberate Milwaukee, and LIT is we got to fund them. That's how we can support them. We can send them money directly through Venmo and Cash App and other sources. These young people, they need to be sustained if they're going to continue to think about what really are abolitionist solutions. When you take a step to defunding police and thinking about what community health might look like outside of law enforcement.
Yes. Hold on. I want to editorialize on that for 1 second. Also, to fund the work they're doing outside of voter mobilization, because that is being funded right now, but also of understanding that it's not every 2 or 4 years that things really matter in community.
Fred, let me get you back into the conversation, and we still have some folks who are listening in. This is really important. Somebody once told me it really wasn't nothing new under the sun. Fred, somebody who's been in this mix for a long time, talk a little bit about what this moment around the various organization looks like. There's some generational divides. There's some what we appear to be divides in terms of approaches, but I wonder to what extent that's true and where it presents room for collaboration and where there's some challenges. Can you give us some perspective?
Absolutely. Just like European Americans are not monolithic, African Americans are not monolithic in thought, in desires, and what our asks are. While LIT, Block, African American Roundtable have their demands, their are other demands from other organizations that have been developed years ago that
Right.
have not been actuated. This is not the first time that we have been in this situation where we have had outrage over the injustices of seeing folks killed. But it always seems to come to this point where we have this great interest, we have these great debates, and then 6 months from now, everyone has pulled back. They have no longer, uh, because of the powers to be that will sign your paycheck, will put pressure to bear to say, no, things are going to remain the same, or you're going to jeopardize your livelihood. That's how frank these conversations are going to get. I guarantee you. You have my number. Give me a call when somebody approaches you.
You know that I really from the perspective of somebody who kind of likes to look at the history of civil rights agitation, I like this moment because what appear to be divisions from my lens are nothing more than perspectives, and yet those mildly differing perspectives continue to get in the way of wide scale collaboration. We're talking about arguments over word choice.
Wait, did you just say our Milwaukee motto, Rob? That's
No.
the motto of Milwaukee. Small differences.
We're talking about
collaboration.
That's I can't collaborate with you because you use this word instead of that word.
Yep.
Man, this is and there's nothing like young people, right? Young people having made these same claims myself, thinking that what I'm doing is new and different. This is all a part of movement history.
Just to add, I was gonna say earlier that the first police accountability organization that I've come across here was the Sixth Ward Law and Order League in the 1920s, 1930s. Right, they were addressing a lot of the same issues around police brutality among the very first African American migrants in this city back in the Harding administration. Right, so they've been having this really similar conversations and trying to negotiate with the white power structure in the city, going all the way back.
Fred, I so appreciate what you were saying and what you were just said, Will. I was watching some of the youthful exuberance, because I'm an old guy now, I'm 35 and I already feel old. I was watching some of the youthful protesters out on the street, and they're saying things like, we're making history, which I think they are, and I'm not disputing that at all. But some of them will go on and take that a step further and say things like, this has never happened before.
Right.
Yesterday I heard an account that one of the voices at the lead of the march was saying, this is all impromptu, just like Rosa Parks. So I think what I would say there is, I think it is incumbent upon us and those of you who are still on the call, because you guys obviously care a lot, I think in some ways the way in which we've failed them in passing history to them, we can't say is entirely their fault. It's a shared project that we have to have of Rob and I were just talking about this offline the other day, is that, you don't need to know your history to make history, but it sure doesn't hurt. Right.
Oh, it helps a lot. It helps a lot.
Yeah. Yes. So I do think in some ways, while there can be that absence of the sense of a connection to the movement that's been long building that they're a part of, I don't think we can put it totally at their feet and say it's your fault for not knowing this.
No, not at all. Absolutely not.
Rob, can I just briefly make one statement to all you academics and teachers? One thing our country has never done is taught American history.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
I said in my post about this event is I was really happy to talk to people with historians who don't practice history as a practice in white nostalgia. Because I think that is absolutely, so I think, Fred, I 100% agree with you, is that when we put American history in front of a lot of young people, it's sort of a parade of white sentimentality. And that's why a lot of kids don't care.
And I mean, my experience is when you push any kind of critical agenda about race, when you talk about race outside of the well-paved and established sort of white lens that we typically think about when we look at history, just a lot of students are just shut down. And this is something I've come to learn. I grew up in California, so living in the Midwest for 8 years, I've learned that if you talk about race in the Midwest, especially with our students at Marquette, you're already racist. You're already representing an ideological bent. So for them, they don't even want to approach the topic. They don't even want to enter this discussion because doing so is already committing to a political agenda. And so it's not just that we don't teach the right history or we don't teach history, U.S. history at all. It's also that we're ill prepared to address topics connected to race and racism and inequality outside of those tropes and catchphrases that are pre-approved by what the powers that be.
Hey team, I gotta run. Thanks everybody.
All right, thanks, Adam. We're just going to stay another minute or two. We got some folks who are still hanging around here who also teach race and who also teach tough topics and who also teach large numbers of diverse students. So you all are panelists. You can jump in our conversation if you like. We're only going to stay another minute or two. I know that we've got things to do. So
Hey, Rob, can you hear me?
yeah, Heather, go ahead.
Hey, everybody. To follow up on what Grant said, the biggest problem is to whom we're teaching this history. And as we have a select population at Marquette, about 4% of which is actually interested in learning it. But all the people who are on the streets, how do we harness their energy right now? Not in a classroom, not, in all our traditional methods that are already directed toward people with privilege, and get that knowledge known. I don't care if they think they're reinventing the world. That's great. I need that energy, but it's also helpful to help. What we can do is help them harness that energy in terms of channeling it productively if they know just a little bit about what came before. So to the degree that people can come up with suggestions about where we could offer this knowledge for free that we could get people to come to, I'd be all in on that one.
Well, I think we're trying to, and I also think that it's a good question, and it's also one of the many questions around social change, is to what extent do young people in particular have the leeway to pave a future in their sense of what the world should look like. And so in some ways we want to do that, in some ways we don't want to do that as well. If the expertise of Ella Baker and others is still valuable, and certainly it is. On the one hand, we want to provide whatever kinds of support that the young people might want. And on the other hand, we also have the responsibility to not get in their way. And that's, it's a delicate balance. I don't know that there's a right, wrong, easy, or simple answer to it. It's challenging, Any other thoughts, folks, before we end this conversation altogether? I appreciate the names that I'm seeing here. Boy, I tell you, we need, too bad we can't have happy hour.
Been a great conversation.
One thing that I want to add is, just because there has been a lot of talk about it, is the Insurrection Act of 1807 and the invocation of it possibly by the Trump administration. And I think it's informative for us to remember that part of the reason that even became a law was due to fears and anxieties that sprang out of the Haitian Revolution. So a lot of white Southern slave owners feared that there would be insurrections that rose up on the continent, so they banded together to get that law passed. And it is also an interesting side note that the last time it was invoked was in the LA riots of 1992 when William Barr
Thanks,
was
Fred. We appreciate you.
William H.
Man. Thanks,
Yeah.
Fred. Take care now.
was Bush 1's attorney general.
Cool. All right, folks, we got other stuff we got to do. It was nice to sit with the choir a little bit. we'll figure out what the next conversation should be along these threads. We've got some more conversations planned for June. We're going to be doing Latinx history as well, and so we're going to keep these going. But I know on this question of the moment, the challenges we're in as a society, we need to keep having these conversations, and we'll certainly do so. So you folks take care. Have a good afternoon, and you know, it's movement time.
Hit the streets.
All right, take care, folks.